Pick any pure girl. The preacher set his voice echoing in a dusty frontier church. But when the giant rancher rose to his feet, he didn't choose the smiling, untouched girls. He pointed instead to the one everyone whispered about, the ruined woman cast aside by the town. Gasps filled the pews. The church bell tolled. A life changed in an instant. At first, it seemed like an act of mercy, a chance for dignity where none remained. But hidden beneath the silence was a terrible secret. The son of a powerful man was coming back to claim what he thought was his. Keys rattled in the jail. Hooves thundered on the trail. A family stood trembling in the crossfire between shame, truth, and justice. Will the rancher's choice bring redemption to a broken woman and her child, or will it unleash a storm that destroys them all? Before we begin, share a piece of your world in the comments. Your city, your energy. It's a powerful thing, being part of something bigger than ourselves through the church's high windows. The last light of day painted golden stripes across worn wooden pews. The scent of lamp oil and fresh-cut spring flowers mingled in the air as townsfolk settled into their seats, excitement humming through the sanctuary. Women fanned themselves with them sheets while men tugged at their Sunday collars. All eyes drawn to the group of young orphan girls lined up at the front. Preacher Reed stood before his congregation, Bible clasped in weathered hands. The choosing ceremony is a sacred tradition, he declared, voice carrying to the rafters. The good book tells us that a virtuous wife is worth more than rubies. Tonight, worthy men of our community will select pure young women to build godly homes. The double doors at the back creaked open, drawing all heads around. Levi Branson's tall frame filled the doorway, his shadow stretching long across the floorboards. Trail dust coated his boots and the hem of his black coat. Without a word, he made his way to an empty spot in the last pew, settling his broad shoulders. Against the hard wood, in a corner near the front, Karen May kept her eyes fixed on her folded hands. Her plain brown dress marked her as different from the orphan girls in their pressed white pinafores. Years of whispered gossip had worn grooves in her spirit deeper than the circles beneath her eyes. She could feel the occasional glances in her direction, pitying, judging, dismissing. "Let us begin, preacher," Reed announced, gesturing to the first eligible bachelor. "Brother Thomas, make your choice." One by one, the men rose and pointed to their preferred bride. The prettier girls were claimed quickly, leaving behind those with crooked teeth or dull hair. With each selection, Karen's shoulders curved further inward, as if trying to make herself invisible. When only 3 girls remained, the preacher's gaze swept the congregation. Who else seeks a wife this evening? Shuffling sound drew attention. To the back pew, Levi Branson rose to his full height, his scarred face impassive. The floorboards groaned under his measured steps as he moved to the center aisle. Karen could feel his presence like approaching thunder, though she dared not look up. "Brother Branson," Preacher Reed smiled. "Choose any of these pure young. Give me the ruined one." The words fell like stones into still water. Karen's head jerked up, her heart stuttering. Levi stood directly before her, one hand extended. His eyes, usually hard as river rocks, held something she couldn't name. Gasps rippled through the sanctuary. Mrs. Potter dropped her fan. Someone's child started crying before being quickly hushed. The preacher's face flushed red as he stepped forward. "Brother Branson, surely you don't mean these fine girls here are?" "I mean exactly what I say." Levi's voice was quiet but carried. "The weight of mountains, I choose Karen May." The silence stretched tight as piano wire. Karen's hands trembled in her lap as she finally met Levi's steady gaze. The lamplight caught the silver threading his dark hair, the old scar running from temple to jaw. But it was the kindness in his eyes that made her breath catch. "This is highly irregular," Preacher Reed sputtered. The choosing ceremony is meant for finding wives, ain't it? Levi turned to face him. That's what I aim to do. But the preacher lowered his voice. After what happened with Victor Hale, she's what? Levi's tone could have frozen creek water. Choose your next words careful, preacher. Reed's mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. The congregation seemed to hold its collective breath. Karen felt dizzy, as if the floor was tilting beneath her feet. Stand up, Miss May, Levi said softly. If you're willing. Karen's legs shook as she rose. She was aware of every eye in the church boring into her, of the whispers starting to hiss. Between the pews, but Levi's calm presence steadied her like a hand on a spooked horse. I don't need a pure girl, Levi addressed the sanctuary. I need a woman who knows about hurt and healing, who understands that sometimes life ain't fair, but you get up anyway. He turned back to Karen. I need someone who can teach my ranch. Hands about dignity, 'cause she never lost hers, even when folks tried to steal it. Tears blurred Karen's vision. She blinked them back, unwilling to show weakness before these people who had shunned her for so long. Levi's words wrapped around her like a warm shawl, offering protection she'd thought forever lost. This is God's house. Preacher Reed found his voice at last. We have standards. Yes, we do. Levi's tone could have driven nails. Standards. Of mercy, of justice, of seeing folks the way the good Lord sees them, not the way gossip paints them. He held out his hand again. What do you say, Miss May? Will you make a home with me? Karen looked at his offered hand, work-roughened, strong, reaching across the divide that had separated her from the town for years. In that moment, she saw more than just an escape from loneliness. She saw redemption, offered freely and without shame. Her fingers trembled as they slipped into his calloused palm. Yes, she whispered, I will. A murmur ran through the church like wind through prairie grass. But Levi paid it no mind, his eyes fixed on Karen's face as if memorizing every detail. With gentle pressure, he drew her to stand beside him, turning to face the congregation. Preacher, he said firmly, I reckon you've got a wedding to perform. Eh? The old minister mopped his brow with a handkerchief, clearly torn between tradition and the immovable force that was Levi Branson. Finally, he gave a shaky nod. Very well. Though perhaps we should wait until now suits us fine, Levi interrupted. His thumb brushed across Karen's knuckles, a small gesture of reassurance that made her heart flutter. Unless Miss May objects. Karen straightened her spine, finding strength in his quiet certainty. Now suits me fine too. The lamplight caught the silver cross hanging behind the pulpit, making it gleam like a star fallen to earth. As Preacher Reed reluctantly opened his Bible, Karen felt something long buried begin to bloom in her chest. It felt like hope. Preacher Reed fumbled with his Bible, pages rustling like autumn leaves as his fingers searched for the marriage ceremony. Lamplight flickered across his furrowed brow, casting deep shadows that made him look older than his years. The usual confidence in his voice wavered as he began the sacred words. Dearly beloved, he stammered, we are gathered here in the sight of God. His eyes darted between Levi and Karen, then to the restless congregation behind them. Karen's hands trembled like aspen leaves in Levi's steady grip. His calloused fingers were warm against hers, anchoring her as whispers hissed through the sanctuary. She kept her eyes fixed on their joined hands, unable to meet the stares boring into her back. Do you, Levi Branson? The preacher's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. Do you take Karen May to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Levi's voice rang clear and firm, filling the church with unwavering certainty. And, do you, Karen May? Preacher Reed paused, sweat beading on his forehead. Take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband. I do. Her whispered response seemed to echo in the tense silence. The ring ceremony was brief. A simple gold band Levi produced from his vest pocket. It slid loose on her thin finger, but its weight felt like a lifeline. When preacher read, pronounced, "Them, man and wife," no one said amen. The congregation filed out quickly, boots scraping against wooden floors, skirts rustling as women hurried past. Nobody offered congratulations. The setting sun painted long shadows through the windows, stretching across empty pews like accusing fingers. Outside, the spring evening air carried the scent of sage and dust. A group of ranch wives huddled near the hitching post, their whispers carrying clearly in the stillness. "Never thought I'd see the day. Poor Levi. Surely he could have chosen better." What's he thinking? Bringing shame to a good name like Branson? Heat crawled up Karen's neck and into her cheeks. She stared at the ground, counting the pebbles, scattered across the packed dirt, willing herself not to cry. A gentle touch at her elbow made her start. "This way," Levi said softly, guiding her toward his horse, a tall bay gelding that stood quietly at the post. He helped her mount with careful hands, making sure her skirts were settled properly before swinging up behind her. The saddle creaked as they settled into place. Karen sat rigid, hardly daring to breathe as his arms reached around her to gather the reins. They rode out of town in silence, hoofbeats muffled in the dusty street. The last rays of sunlight painted the rolling plains in shades of gold and purple, while overhead the first stars began to peek through the darkening sky. Wind whispered through the prairie grass, accompanying the steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the subtle sounds of leather and metal. Karen's back ached from sitting so straight, but she couldn't bring herself to relax against Levi's chest. Nightbirds called in the distance, a mourning dove's soft coo, a killdeer's cry. The familiar sounds of evening on the prairie wrapped around them like a worn quilt, but brought little comfort to her churning thoughts. After what seemed like hours, Levi reined the horse to a stop beside a small creek. Water burbled over stones, catching starlight like scattered silver coins. He dismounted first, then reached up to help her down. Her legs trembled as they took her weight, and his hands lingered at her waist until she found her balance. While the horse drank deeply from the clear water, Levi turned to face her. In the gathering darkness, his expression was difficult to read, but his voice carried gentle certainty. "You're safe now." Those 3 words, spoken so simply, threatened to crack the careful shell she'd built around her heart. Karen wrapped her arms around herself, unable to respond past the tightness in her throat. They resumed their journey in the same silence. But something had shifted, like a door cracked open to let in fresh air. The night deepened around them as they rode, till at last a cluster of buildings took shape against the star-strewn sky. Levi's ranch spread across the rolling land, a sturdy main house, barn, and bunkhouse, with corrals and outbuildings beyond. A few lights glowed in the bunkhouse windows, but he guided the horse toward the main house. It was a simple structure, built of solid logs with a wide porch wrapped around 3 sides. He helped her dismount one final time, then led the way up. The porch steps. The boards creaked beneath their feet as he opened the door. Inside, he struck a match and lit a lamp, warming the room with soft golden light. Karen stood just inside the doorway, taking in her surroundings. The main room was plain but well kept, with a stone fireplace, solid furniture, and clean-swept floors. A few books sat on a shelf, and a worn Bible lay on a small table near what must be Levi's chair. The space spoke of solitude, of quiet evenings, and simple needs. "I never thought," she began, then stopped, struggling to find words. "I never thought I'd see kindness again." The admission came out barely above a whisper. Levi moved quietly around the kitchen, gathering bowls and spoons. Soon, the smell of warming stew filled the air. He set 2 places at the small table, then pulled out a chair for her. "Sit," he said gently. "You must be hungry." When they were both seated, he bowed his head over his bowl. Karen watched him for a moment, memories of long-ago family suppers rising unbidden in her mind. Slowly, she bowed her own head as his deep voice filled the quiet room. "Lord, we thank you for this food, for this roof, and for bringing us together. Watch over us as we begin this new path. Amen." They ate in companionable silence, broken only by the clink of spoons against bowls and the distant sounds of night insects singing their evening chorus. When the meal was finished, Levi showed her to the guest room, a small but clean space with a narrow bed, chest of drawers, and window looking out over the prairie. "Sleep well," he said simply, closing the door behind him. Karen sat on the edge of the bed, running her fingers over the clean quilt. The events of the day seemed almost dreamlike now, the choosing ceremony. Levi's unexpected declaration, the hurried wedding, the long ride across the darkening plains. She changed into her nightdress with trembling hands and slipped between the cool sheets. Lying in the darkness, listening to the familiar prairie night sounds through the open window, Karen felt something stir in her heart. It was hope, fragile, as a newly sprouted seed, terrifying in its vulnerability. But alongside it crept fear, whispering of all the ways this strange new life might bring fresh pain. She turned onto her side, watching moonlight paint silver patterns on the floor. The ring on her finger caught the pale light, gleaming softly. A constant reminder of the day's changes, of promises made and of future uncertain. Dawn painted the Colorado sky in shades of pearl and gold as Karen woke in her new bed. The crisp mountain air drifted through the window, carrying the scent of pine and sage. For a moment, she lay still, listening to unfamiliar sounds, the distant low of cattle, the creak of windmill blades, the sharp rhythm of an axe splitting. Wood. Her bare feet touched the cool floorboards as she dressed quickly in her simple cotton dress. The mirror showed her reflection, pale face, dark circles beneath her eyes, hair hastily pinned back. She smoothed her skirts with trembling hands, gathering courage to face her first morning as Mrs. Branson. Outside, she found Levi already at work. His powerful frame swung the axe in steady arcs, splitting cedar rails for fence mending. Sweat darkened his shirt despite the morning chill. He paused when he saw her, resting the axe handle against his boot. "Morning," he said, nodding toward the house. "Coffee's hot on the stove. Help yourself." In the kitchen, Karen found not just coffee, but a plate of cornbread, slightly burned around the edges. The sight brought an unexpected smile clearly. Levi was more skilled with an axe than a cooking fire. She ate standing at the window, watching him work while sipping the strong coffee. After she'd washed the few breakfast dishes, Levi appeared in the doorway. "Thought you might want to see the place," he offered quietly, "if you're ready." They walked together in the strengthening sunlight, boots crunching on gravel. Levi pointed out the essential parts of the ranch, the sturdy barn with its fresh swept floors, the cattle pens where young calves pressed against their mother's sides, the bunkhouse where his handful of ranch hands slept. "And there's the chapel," he said finally, voice softening as they approached a small wooden building set apart from the others. Dust coated the windows, and wild roses climbed one wall, their thorny stems tangled and untended. "Sarah, my first wife, she loved this place." His words carried the weight of old grief. "Used to hold services here for the hands and any neighbors who wanted to come. Been closed up since she passed." Karen traced a finger through the dust on a window pane, revealing the colored glass beneath. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Levi nodded, then cleared his throat. "Well, that's the tour. I need to check the north pasture fence." "You're welcome to." He hesitated, clearly unsure what to suggest. "I cook clean," Karen offered. "Cook too, if you'd like." Relief crossed his face. "Be much obliged." Whatever you think needs doing." By mid-morning, Karen had swept the main house's floors and started bread dough rising in the warm kitchen. The familiar tasks settled her nerves, giving her hands purpose. She was kneading a second batch when hoofbeats announced riders approaching. Through the window, she watched 4 men dismount in the yard. Ranch hands coming in for their midday meal, she realized. Their curious glances toward the house made her stomach tighten. Mrs. Branson, the oldest hand, gray-haired and weathered, removed his hat as he stepped onto the porch. "Name's Pete Wilson. Been working for Mr. Branson going on 8 years now. Please, come in," Karen managed, wiping flour from her hands. "I've made coffee." The men filed in, boots scraping on the floorboards. Their politeness felt careful, measured. They'd heard the gossip from town. She knew whispers about her past, her shame. But she also sensed their deep loyalty to Levi. They wouldn't openly question his choice, even if doubt shadowed their eyes. "Smells good in here, Pete," commented, accepting a cup of coffee. The other hands, Tom, Marcus, and young Billy, murmured agreement. "Bread'll be ready soon," Karen said. "And there's stew from last night." They ate at the kitchen table, trading stories about broken fences and straying cattle. Karen listened as she served them, slowly relaxing as their initial stiffness eased. These were good men, she decided. Simple in their ways, but honest. When Levi returned, dust-covered and hungry, the atmosphere shifted slightly. The hands straightened. Their jokes gentled. Their respect for him was obvious in every gesture. Every yes, sir, and no, sir. The afternoon passed in a blur of household tasks. Karen found comfort in the routine, feeding chickens, gathering eggs, preparing supper. As sunset approached, she heard the men returning from their day's work. Their voices carried through the evening air, trading tales of past roundups and cattle drives. "Remember that spring storm 2 years back?" Tom's voice rose above the others. Lightning spooked the whole herd. "Never seen cattle run so fast. Would have lost half of them if Mr. Branson hadn't turned them himself," Pete added. "Rode straight into that storm like it was nothing." Karen moved around the kitchen, serving bowls of beans and ham, fresh bread still warm from the oven. The men's appreciation was obvious in cleaned plates and murmured thanks. "Fine meal, Mrs. Branson," Pete said, speaking for them all. Later, after the hands had retired to the bunkhouse, Levi helped her clear the table. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for the cooking, for making them welcome." His eyes met hers for a moment longer than usual, then dropped away. When the kitchen was clean, Karen stepped out onto the porch. The night sky stretched endless above. Her stars scattered like diamond dust across black velvet. A cool breeze carried the sweet scent of prairie grass and distant sage. She gripped the porch rail, overwhelmed by the day's emotions. Everything felt new, uncertain, yet somehow right. Like pieces of a puzzle slowly finding their proper places. "Lord," she whispered to the stars, "give me strength to build something good here, something true." The prairie night surrounded her with familiar sounds, crickets chirping, nightbirds calling, the soft shuffling of cattle in their pens. For the first time in years, Karen felt the stirring of belonging. Not acceptance yet, perhaps, but the possibility of it. A chance to create a life in this place, among these people who had chosen to give her a chance. She stayed on the porch until the evening chill sent her inside, carrying that fragile hope like a candle flame cupped in her hands. The wagon wheels creaked under their weight as Levi guided the horses down the rutted trail toward town. For days had passed since the wedding, and they needed supplies from the mercantile. Karen sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap, watching. Dust rise from the horses' hooves. The morning sun cast long shadows across the prairie grass. A cool breeze carried the scent of sage and wildflowers, but Karen barely noticed. Her stomach churned at the thought of facing the townspeople again. The steady clop of hooves marked their progress, each step bringing them closer to Dry Creek. "Will, make it quick," Levi said, as if reading her thoughts. "Just the essentials." Karen nodded, grateful for his understanding. The wagon rolled past the livery stable and onto the main street. Already, heads turned. Women paused in their morning errands, parasols tilting to shield whispered conversations. Men lounging outside the saloon straightened, exchanging knowing smirks. Levi pulled the wagon to a stop in front of Jensen's Mercantile. The store's bell jangled as they entered, the sound sharp in the hushed interior. Karen kept close to Levi's broad shoulder as they moved between the crowded shelves. "Sugar," she murmured, reaching for a paper-wrapped package. "And coffee, if you please." "Whatever you need," Levi answered, his voice carrying clearly through the store. The whispers rose like smoke around them. Mrs. Thompson and Mrs. Baker. Stalwarts of the Church Ladies' Aid Society stood near the fabric counter, their faces pinched with disapproval. "Shameless," Mrs. Thompson hissed, loud enough to carry, bringing his ruined wife right into town. Karen's hands trembled as she selected a spool of thread. She could feel their stares burning into her back, hear the rustle of skirts as other women drew away. Levi's jaw tightened, but he continued loading supplies into their basket: flour, salt, lamp oil. At the counter, Mr. Jensen tallied their purchases with careful politeness. The store's door opened again, admitting Mrs. Reed, the preacher's wife. Her sharp eyes fixed on Karen immediately. "Well," Mrs. Reed said, her voice cutting through the murmurs, "I see you've brought her to corrupt our town in person." Karen's breath caught. The room went still. Mrs. Reed stepped closer, her face a mask of righteous concern. "I must think of the children, you understand? They're so impressionable to see. Such a woman walking freely among decent folk. That's enough." Levi's deep voice filled the store. He moved between Karen and Mrs. Reed, his height making the preacher's wife step back. "My wife is under my protection. Speak no further." The silence that followed was absolute. Mrs. Reed's mouth opened, then closed without sound. Even the whispers died away. Levi placed coins on the counter, gathered their purchases, and guided Karen outside with a gentle hand at her elbow. No one spoke as they loaded the wagon. Karen climbed up beside him, her legs shaking so badly she nearly missed the step. They were well outside town before she found her voice. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "The shame I've brought on you, no." Levi's hand tightened on the reins. "You've nothing to apologize for. What happened to you was wrong. The shame belongs to those who judged without mercy." Tears blurred Karen's vision. She blinked them away, watching the prairie roll past. The morning's bright promise had faded, leaving her drained and hollow. "The Lord knows the truth," Levi continued quietly. "That's what matters." The rest of the ride passed in silence. At the ranch, Pete and the other hands helped unload the wagon, their faces carefully neutral. They'd heard about the incident in town already, news traveling fast across the prairie. Their awkward attempts to avoid staring at Karen spoke volumes. Karen moved through the afternoon like a shadow, preparing supper mechanically. The beans and cornbread she served were perfect, but she barely tasted them. The hands ate quickly and retired to their usual evening card game in the corner. Their voices hushed. Levi settled in his chair by the hearth after the dishes were done. The leather binding of his Bible was worn smooth from years of handling. He opened it without comment, the pages rustling in the quiet room. "The Lord is my shepherd," he read, his voice low and steady. "I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters." Karen sat in the shadows. letting the familiar words wash over her. Tears stung her eyes as Levi continued reading, his deep voice bringing comfort she hadn't expected to find. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. The ranch hands had stopped their card game, listening silently. Even Pete's weathered face softened in the lamplight. Karen pressed her hands together, feeling the warmth of the fire, the strength in Levi's voice, the unexpected peace of this moment. For the first time since that terrible day years ago, she felt truly protected. Not just by Levi's physical presence, but by his unwavering defense of her dignity. The tears that fell now were different from the bitter ones she'd shed so often before. The Bible's pages whispered as Levi turned them, continuing to read into the gathering night. Karen closed her eyes, letting the ancient words of comfort sink deep into her wounded spirit. The afternoon sun hung high over the ranch as Karen pinned wet shirts to the clothesline. Her fingers worked quickly, practiced at the familiar task. The fresh laundry snapped in the warm breeze, sheets billowing like sails against the clear Colorado sky. Levi worked nearby, mending a broken fence post. The steady rhythm of his hammer punctuated the quiet afternoon. Sweat darkened his shirt as he worked. Stopping occasionally to wipe his brow with a bandana, Karen's hands trembled as she reached for another shirt. The secret she'd carried these past days pressed heavy on her heart. Each morning, she'd woken determined to tell him, but courage failed her. Now, watching him work with such steady purpose, she knew she couldn't wait any longer. Levi, her voice came out barely above a whisper. He looked up, setting his hammer aside. Yes, Karen's fingers twisted in the damp fabric. There's something I need to tell you. She swallowed hard, fighting the fear that threatened to choke her words. Something important. Levi walked over, his expression concerned. He waited patiently as she struggled to find the words. I have, her voice faltered. She drew a shaky breath and tried again. I have a son. The words hung in the air between them. Karen's heart pounded so hard she was sure he must hear it. She couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes, terrified of what she might see there. He's 6 years old, she continued quickly, the words tumbling out now. His name is Samuel. He's been living with a Cherokee widow outside town, Kata. She took us in when no one else would. She helped birth him, kept him safe when the town turned against me. Silence stretched between them. Karen's hands shook so badly she had to grip the clothesline to steady herself. She waited for anger, for rejection, for the disgust she'd seen in so many faces before. Instead, Levi moved closer. He knelt down beside her chair, bringing his tall frame level with hers. His eyes, when she finally dared to look, held no judgment, only a gentle understanding that made her throat tight with unshed tears. Bring him home, he said, simply. Karen stared at him, hardly daring to believe. You mean that? Levi nodded. No child should grow up in hiding. Tell me about him. Relief flooded through her so strongly that her legs felt weak. She sank down onto a nearby crate, the forgotten laundry swaying in the breeze behind her. Samuel is. A smile touched her lips as she spoke of her son. He's quiet, like me, but curious about everything. Ada teaches him Cherokee ways, plants, stories, their beliefs. He helps her tend her garden. She twisted her hands in her apron. He's never known a father. We'll ride out tomorrow, Levi said. First light? You can show me the way to Ada's place. Karen nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Levi returned to his fence work, giving her space to collect herself. The steady pounding of his hammer resumed, but now it felt like a promise, rather than just repairs. That evening, the ranch hands gathered for supper as usual. Pete told stories about a stubborn calf while passing the cornbread. Tom and Jake argued good-naturedly about the best way to break a wild horse. Their laughter filled the kitchen, warming it like the lamplight. Karen ladled out bowls of rich beef stew, her movements steady despite her racing thoughts. None of the men knew the weight that had been lifted from her heart. They couldn't see how everything had changed with those 3 simple words from Levi. Bring him home. After the meal, while the hands cleared their dishes, Karen stepped out onto the porch. The evening air carried the scent of sage and distant rain. Stars were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Levi's boots creaked on the wooden boards as he joined her. They stood in comfortable silence, watching night settle over the ranch. Through the window behind them, lamplight flickered, and the sound of the men's conversation drifted out. "Thank you," Karen whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For your mercy, for understanding." "No mercy needed," Levi replied quietly. "No child should grow up without a home, without family." He paused, then added, "The Lord provides in unexpected ways." Karen nodded, unable to speak. Inside, she heard Pete laugh at something Tom said. The familiar sounds of the ranch settling. For the night surrounded them, horses nickering in the barn, a coyote calling in the distance, the creak of the windmill turning slowly in the evening breeze. Standing there in the gathering dusk, Karen felt something shift inside her. The trust she'd been so afraid to give began to take root, like a seed finding fertile soil after a long drought. Tomorrow would bring challenges, introducing Samuel to his new home, helping him adjust to ranch life, facing whatever the town might say. But for now, in this moment, she felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. The lamp in the kitchen window cast a gentle glow across the porch, illuminating Levi's profile as he gazed out at his land. In the soft light, Karen saw not just the strong rancher who had chosen her despite her past, but a man whose heart was big enough to welcome a child he'd never met. A cool breeze stirred the evening air, carrying the promise of tomorrow's journey. Inside, the ranch hands began their nightly routine of cards and conversation, unaware that soon their family would grow by one small, precious addition. The horizon glowed pink and gold as Levi led to saddled horses from the barn. Morning dew sparkled on the grass, and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage across the ranch yard. He'd risen before dawn, checking each saddle strap with careful attention and packing provisions in the leather saddlebags, biscuits still warm from the oven, strips of dry jerky, and a water skin for the journey ahead. Karen emerged from the house, her shawl pulled tight against the morning chill. Her steps were quick but uncertain, betraying the mix of hope and anxiety that had kept her awake most of the night. Levi offered his cupped hands to help her mount, and she settled into the saddle with practiced ease. "Ready?" he asked softly. She nodded, unable to find words past the tightness in her throat. The horses' hooves thudded softly against the packed earth as they set out, leaving the sleeping ranch behind. The morning sun climbed higher as they rode, casting long shadows through stands of cottonwood trees. Their branches rustled overhead, leaves shimmering silver green in the light. The trail wound past rocky outcrops and through shallow creek beds where clear water gurgled over smooth stones. Karen led the way, each landmark bringing her closer to her son. They stopped briefly at midday to rest the horses and share a simple meal of biscuits and jerky. Karen's fingers trembled as she broke her biscuit into small pieces, too nervous to eat much. Levi didn't press her to talk, understanding her silence. The sun had passed its peak when Karen pointed to a thin curl of smoke rising above the trees. "There," she said softly, "Ada's cabin." They approached slowly, giving the cabin's occupants time to note their arrival. The modest structure sat in a small clearing, its log walls weathered gray by sun and rain. A neat garden spread to one side, rows of corn and beans climbing tall poles. Herbs and medicinal plants grew in careful beds near the door. Ada appeared in the doorway before they reached the cabin. She was a handsome woman in her 30s, her black hair streaked with silver at the temples. Her dark eyes took in the riders. With careful assessment, warming as they fell on Karen, but remaining cautious as they studied Levi, Karen dismounted quickly, rushing to embrace the Cherokee woman. "Ada," she breathed, "I've missed you." "Welcome, sister," Ada replied, her voice rich and low. She held Karen at arm's length, studying her face. "You look well. Better fed." A small movement in the doorway drew their attention. A dark-haired boy of 6 years peered out from behind Ada's skirt, his eyes wide and wary as he took in the strangers. Karen's breath caught in her throat at the sight of her son. She knelt slowly, arms opening. "Samuel," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "My sweet boy." Samuel glanced up at Ada, who nodded encouragement. He moved forward hesitantly at first, then broke into a run, flinging himself into his mother's arms. Karen held him close, pressing kisses to his dark hair, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Levi dismounted, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He stood back, giving mother and child space for their reunion. Ada watched him closely, her expression guarded but not unfriendly. "You are the one who married Karen," she stated simply. "Yes, ma'am," Levi replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "Levi Branson." Ada nodded slowly. "Come inside. We have much to discuss." The cabin's interior was neat and warm, scented with herbs hanging from the rafters. A pot of venison stew simmered over the hearth, filling the small space with rich aromas. Samuel stayed close to his mother as they settled around Ada's table. His quick glances at Levi, a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. Levi extended his hand toward the boy, palm up, making no sudden moves. "Hello, Samuel. I'm glad to meet you." Samuel studied the offered hand for a long moment before reaching out to touch it briefly. His small fingers traced one of the calluses on Levi's palm before withdrawing. "Do you like horses?" Levi asked quietly. Samuel nodded, some of the wariness leaving his expression. "Ada lets me help with her pony sometimes." "We have many horses at the ranch," Levi said. "Good-natured ones that would suit a boy learning to ride." Samuel's eyes widened with interest, but he looked to Ada, clearly torn between excitement and loyalty to the woman who had helped raise him. Ada served the venison stew in wooden bowls, the rich broth steaming. As they ate, she spoke directly to Levi. "You understand what taking this boy means? A town that scorned his mother will not welcome him with open arms. My home will be his refuge," Levi replied firmly. "I've never much cared what the town thinks, and I won't start now. Samuel will have a family, an education, and all the protection I can give." Ada's expression softened slightly. "You speak well, but words are easy. Actions prove character." "Yes, ma'am, they do." Levi met her steady gaze. "I hope you'll visit often enough to see those actions for yourself." A ghost of a smile touched Ada's lips. "Perhaps I will." As evening approached, Karen sang Samuel to sleep in the small back room, her voice soft and sweet on an old lullaby. Levi stood in the doorway, watching mother and child together. Something stirred in his chest. A sense of purpose, he thought, had died with his first wife years ago. This was right. He knew. This was what the Lord had intended when he led him to choose Karen that night in the church. Morning came clear and cool. Ada helped them pack Samuel's few possessions, some clothes, carved wooden horse she had made him, and a small quilt she had stitched herself. She pressed a packet of dried herbs into Karen's hands. For sleep, she explained, a boy may have nightmares at first in a strange place. Karen hugged her friend tightly. "I can never repay your kindness." "No payment needed between sisters," Ada replied. She turned to Samuel, kneeling to embrace him. "Be brave, little one. Listen to your mother. I will visit when I can." Samuel clung to her for a long moment before letting go. Levi helped Karen mount, then lifted Samuel to settle in front of her in the saddle. The boy's small hands gripped the pommel tightly, but his posture straightened with excitement as the horse shifted beneath him. Ada raised her hand in blessing as they turned toward home. "May the Creator watch over your path," she called after them. They rode slowly, Karen's arms secure around Samuel as he gradually relaxed into the rhythm of the horse's gait. The morning sun warmed their backs and birds called from the cottonwoods overhead. Ahead lay uncertainty, challenges, and the judgment of others, but also the promise of family, of belonging, of a love strong enough to overcome the shadows of the past. The ranch house rose into view as they crested the final hill, its weathered boards glowing golden in the late afternoon sun. 3 ranch hands stood near the corral, pausing in their work to watch the approaching riders. Karen felt Samuel tense against her as strange faces turned their way. "It's all right," she whispered, squeezing him gently. "These men work for Levi. They're good people." Levi dismounted first, then lifted Samuel carefully from the saddle before helping Karen down. The boy pressed close to his mother's skirts, dark eyes darting between the approaching men. "Boys," Levi called out, his deep voice carrying across the yard, "come meet my family." 2 of the hands, Pete and Charlie, stepped forward with warm smiles, removing their hats. The third, Jim, held back slightly, his expression guarded as he noted Samuel's features. "Welcome home, Mrs. Branson," Pete said kindly. He crouched down to Samuel's level. "And welcome to you too, young fella. We've got some right friendly horses here that might like to meet you." Samuel's grip on Karen's skirt loosened slightly. "Really? Sure do." Pete pointed to a gentle paint horse in the corral. "That one there, she's sweet as honey. Name's Butterfly." A small smile tugged at Samuel's lips, though he still stayed close to Karen. Charlie also offered a friendly greeting, but Jim merely nodded curtly before turning back to his work. Karen noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes had narrowed at Samuel's appearance. Her heart sank, knowing this wouldn't be the last time her son faced such judgment. Levi's hands settled warm and steady on her shoulder. "Let's get you both settled inside," he said quietly. "It's been a long ride." The house felt different now, more alive somehow, with Samuel's presence filling its rooms. Karen unpacked the few belongings Ada had sent while the boy explored cautiously, touching the worn furniture and peering out windows. When Levi brought in his wooden toy chest from the barn, Samuel's eyes lit up. "This was mine when I was about your age," Levi explained, opening the lid to reveal carved animals and blocks. "Reckon it's yours now." Samuel looked up at him in wonder. "Really? For me? For you?" Levi's smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Every boy needs proper toys." As evening approached, Karen worked in the kitchen, kneading dough for biscuits, while savory stew bubbled on the stove. The familiar motions calmed her racing thoughts, helped ground her in this new reality. Through the doorway, she could see Levi settled in his chair by the fire. Samuel perched somewhat tentatively on his knee. Levi's deep voice rumbled as he read from his worn Bible. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie." Down in green pastures, Samuel leaned closer, finger tracing the words on the page. "What's pastures?" "Fields where animals graze," Levi explained patiently. "Like where our cattle feed." "Oh," Samuel nodded seriously. "Ada has a field like that for her pony." "That's right." Levi continued reading, his steady tone washing over them like a blessing. Karen's hands stilled in the dough as she watched them together. The scene before her seemed almost too precious to be real. This giant of a man cradling her son so carefully, teaching him God's words with such gentleness. For a moment, she could almost believe they were truly whole, truly safe. But shadows? lingered at the edges of her mind, reminding her that peace was never guaranteed. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Karen was teaching Samuel how to feed the chickens when Pete rode in fast from town, dust coating his horse's flanks. He dismounted quickly, seeking out Levi by the barn. "Telegram came for you, boss," Pete said, holding out a folded paper. "From Thompson, over at Silver Creek Ranch, said it was urgent." Levi read the message, his expression darkening. He glanced at Karen and Samuel by the chicken coop, then strode toward the house. "Karen," he called softly, "need to speak with you. Inside." He handed her the telegram. Her hands trembled as she read the words, "Victor hailed back in Dry Creek, asking questions. Watch your back." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Karen gripped the back of a chair to steady herself, blood draining from her face. "No," she whispered. "No, he can't be here." "Karen," Levi's voice anchored her. "Who is he?" She closed her eyes, shame and fear warring in her chest. He's the one who," the words stuck in her throat. "The one who hurt you." Levi's tone was gentle, but she could hear the controlled anger beneath it. Karen nodded. "Victor Hale, the railroad baron's son." She forced herself to meet Levi's gaze. "He promised if I ever told anyone, he'd silence me forever," said. "No one would believe me anyway, against his family's word." Levi's massive hands clenched into fists, tendons standing out along his forearms. For a moment, raw fury blazed in his eyes. Then he took a deep breath, deliberately relaxing his fingers. "Listen to me," he said, voice low and fierce. "You are. My wife now, Samuel, is under my protection. That man will never touch either of you. But his father's money, his influence, mean nothing here." Levi's tone brooked no argument. "This is my land, my home, and I protect what's mine." Through the window, they could see Samuel still scattering corn for the chickens, laughing as they pecked around his feet. The sight of him, so innocent and vulnerable, sent fresh fear through Karen's heart. "We need to be careful," she whispered. "Victor, he enjoys hurting people, making them suffer." Levi nodded grimly. "Pete," he called, through the open door. The ranch hand appeared quickly. "Ride out and get Charlie and Jim. I want the barn secured before dark." Extra planks across the doors, and someone watching the road at all times. "Yes, boss." Pete touched his hat brim and hurried off. As evening fell, Karen watched Levi and the men reinforcing the barn's defenses. The solid thud of hammer against nails echoed across the yard. Jim took first watch near the road, rifle across his lap. Whatever his feelings about Samuel, his loyalty to Levi was clear. Later, Karen tucked Samuel into his new bed, smoothing the quilt Ada had made him. "Mama?" he asked sleepily. "Is this really our home now?" "Yes, sweetheart." She kissed his forehead. "And you're not fatherless anymore. Levi will take care of us both. Promise." "I promise." Karen's voice was firm, even as her heart quivered with uncertainty. "Now sleep, little one. Angels are watching over you." She lingered in the doorway, watching Samuel's breathing even out into slumber. Beyond his window, she could hear the night sounds of the ranch cricket song, the low lowing of cattle, the creak of lumber as the wind brushed the barn. Somewhere in the darkness, Jim kept his vigil by the road. But darker thoughts crept in. Memories of Victor's cruel smile, his whispered threats, the weight of his hand against her throat. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold on to Levi's words of protection, trying to believe they could truly be safe. The Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, with birdsong carrying across the peaceful ranch yard. Karen smoothed Samuel's hair one final time before they climbed into the wagon. The boy wore his best shirt, carefully pressed, though his fingers worried at the stiff collar. "You look mighty fine," Levi assured him, helping them both up onto the wooden seat. The wagon creaked as he settled his large frame beside them, taking up the reins. The ride into town felt longer than usual. Karen's stomach tightened with each turning of the wheels, drawing them closer to Dry Creek's white-steepled church. Samuel pressed against her side, sensing her tension. "Remember what we talked about?" Levi said quietly as they approached the church. "You both belong here, same as anyone." The wagon wheels crunched to a stop on the gravel. Already, Karen could feel the weight of stares from church members gathered on the steps. Conversations died mid-sentence. Women drew their children closer. As if darkness itself had arrived at their door, Levi stepped down first, helping Karen and Samuel with gentle hands. His presence steadied them as they walked toward the church entrance. The crowd parted like water, leaving a path of whispers in their wake down inside. The morning sun streamed through colored windows, painting rainbow patterns across empty pews. Karen guided Samuel to a bench near the back, but Levi shook his head. "Middle row," he said firmly. "We're not hiding." They settled into the wooden pew, Samuel between them. More people filed in, their footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. A few nodded cautiously to Levi, but most averted their eyes. Preacher Reed emerged from the side door, his face flushed red when he spotted them. He fumbled with his Bible, clearing his throat several times before speaking. "Welcome, brothers and sisters," he managed, finally, his voice catching. "And welcome to our new attendees. The organ wheezed to life and hymn books rustled open. Karen's finger traced the familiar lines of Amazing Grace, helping Samuel follow along. When the congregation began to sing, she joined in softly, her sweet voice trembling at first, but growing stronger. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Samuel's high, clear voice joined hers on the second verse, drawing surprised glances from nearby pews. Levi's deep bass rumbled beneath them both, creating a perfect harmony that seemed to fill the entire sanctuary. The preacher's sermon that morning centered on judgment and redemption, his words sometimes faltering when his gaze crossed their pew. Karen kept her head high, though her hands clasped tightly in her lap. After the final hymn, people gathered in clusters outside the church, their whispered conversations barely masking their stares. Karen held Samuel's hand as they descended. The steps, Levi closed behind them. "Well, well." A smooth voice cut through the murmuring crowd. "What an interesting sight." Karen's blood ran cold. Victor Hale stepped forward, resplendent in an expensive Eastern suit. His perfect smile didn't reach his eyes as he looked them over. "Branson," he drawled, "I must congratulate you on your charitable purchase." His gaze slid to Karen, lingering. "Though I wonder if you know exactly what damaged goods you've acquired." Levi's massive frame shifted, placing himself between Victor and his family. "Mind your words, Hale." "Oh, come now." Victor's smile widened. Surely a man has the right to inspect his former property. His eyes found Samuel, and something cruel flickered in their depths. My, what other surprises have you been hiding?" Karen felt Samuel trembling against her skirts. She pulled him closer, fighting the urge to run. Sheriff Dobbs stood nearby, deliberately examining his boot tips. Several townspeople watched the exchange with poorly concealed interest, but none stepped forward. "The lady is my wife," Levi said, his voice dangerously quiet. "The boy is my son. That's all you need to know." Victor laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Wife? Is that what you call it?" He stepped closer, ignoring Levi's sighs. Some things, once ruined, can never truly belong to another man. Levi's hands clenched into fists, but before he could respond, Karen spoke. "You're wrong," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I belong to no man but God, and He has blessed me with a true husband." She met Victor's gaze directly. Your power over me ended long ago." Victor's face darkened. He opened his mouth to reply, but Levi moved forward, forcing him to step back. "We're done here," Levi said. The words carried the weight of mountains. "Stay away from my family." He turned, guiding Karen and Samuel toward their wagon. They could feel Victor's stare boring into their backs, but they didn't look back. The ride home was quiet, broken only by the wagon's creaking and the distant call of meadowlarks. Samuel had fallen asleep against Karen's shoulder by the time they reached the ranch. That evening, after putting Samuel to bed, Karen found Levi on the porch, staring out at the darkening land. "Perhaps we should leave," she said softly, joining him. "Find somewhere new, somewhere safer for Samuel." Levi turned to her, his face shadowed in the fading light. "Is that what you want?" Karen was quiet for a long moment, listening to the cricket song rising from the grass. "No," she said finally. "I'm tired of running. This is our home now. I won't let him take that from us. Then we stay." Levi's voice was firm. "But Victor won't stop. He's a man used to taking what he wants. What will we do?" "Trust in the Lord," Levi said, "and be prepared." He reached for his coat. "I need to walk the fence line, check everything secure." Karen watched as he lit the lantern and strode into the gathering darkness. His figure moved slowly along the fence posts, pausing occasionally to test their strength. His lips moved in what she knew were prayers for guidance and protection. Inside, Karen heard Samuel calling out in his sleep. She hurried to his room, finding him tangled in his quilts. "She, little one," she soothed, sitting beside him. "Mama's here." She began to sing softly, an old hymn her mother had sung to her. "Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart." Her voice stayed steady and clear, though her heart pounded with fear for what might come. Outside, Levi's lantern continued its slow circuit of their land, a lonely light in the vast darkness. The mountain air grew warmer as spring melted into early summer. Morning dews sparkled on the garden rows where Karen knelt, showing Samuel how to tell the difference between sprouting vegetables and weeds. "See here?" She guided his small hand to touch a tender leaf. "These are the carrots coming up. Notice how the leaves look like tiny feathers." Samuel nodded eagerly, his dark eyes bright with interest. "Can I pull the other plants? The bad ones?" "Gently now," Karen instructed, watching as he carefully tugged at a spreading pigweed. His face broke into a proud smile when the roots came. Free from the corral, the sound of hammering echoed across the yard. Levi and his men were hard at work replacing rotted fence posts and mending loose rails. Every so often, Karen caught him glancing their way, a quiet contentment softening his weathered features. The garden flourished under their care. Neat rows of corn reached toward the sky, while beans climbed their poles like green ladders. Samuel took special pride in the pumpkin patch, checking daily for new blossoms. "Reckon we'll have pie come harvest," Levi said one evening, ruffling the boys' hair as they surveyed their growing bounty. Karen's confidence grew alongside her plans. One Saturday, she surprised everyone by announcing she would host supper for all the ranch hands. The kitchen filled with the aroma of baking bread and stewing meat as she worked. Samuel helping to set the long table with mismatched plates. The men filed in at sundown, boots scraping clean on the porch steps. Their usual reticence melted away at the sight of steaming platters and fresh-baked biscuits. Stories and laughter flowed as freely as the coffee, and Karen found herself joining in, her voice carrying naturally above the friendly din. "Best meal I've had since leaving home," declared old Pete, the most senior hand, as he wiped his plate clean with a final biscuit. In the following days, Samuel grew bolder in his explorations of the ranch. Levi taught him to ride on a gentle mare, and soon the boy was racing alongside the colts in the pasture, his whoops of joy carrying across the prairie grass. "He's a natural horseman," Levi told Karen, pride evident in his voice as they watched Samuel navigate the paddock with growing skill. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, Levi took Karen's hand and led her to a small building set apart from the others. The chapel stood silent in the fading light, its windows clouded with dust and cobwebs. Inside, shadows draped the few simple pews. A plain wooden altar stood at the front, its surface gray with years of settled dust. Levi's footsteps echoed in the stillness as he moved forward, his hand trailing along a bench. "Margaret always wanted this place filled with singing again," he said softly, speaking of his late wife. "Said her ranch needs the Lord's presence, same as it needs rain." Karen stepped closer to the altar, her fingers leaving clear trails in the dust. "Then let's restore it," she whispered, her voice carrying in the empty space. "Bring life back to these walls." Levi's eyes met hers, bright with unexpected emotion. "You'd want that?" "Yes," Karen said simply. "This place deserves to be more." Then a memory. They began the very next day. Karen brought buckets and rags, while Levi carried tools to repair the broken windows. Samuel helped too, his small hands gathering him books from beneath the pews where mice had scattered them. Together they swept years of dust from the floors and benches. Karen washed the windows until sunlight streamed through clear glass once more, while Levi mended the cracked panes and straightened the crooked door. Fresh air and purpose flowed through the chapel. Karen hung clean curtains at the windows and placed wildflowers on the altar. Levi repaired the old pump organ, its notes wavering at first but growing stronger with each hymn Karen played. Their evenings developed a gentle rhythm. After supper, while Samuel played with his wooden horses on the floor, Levi would read from his Bible by lamplight. Karen's clear voice often rose in song, teaching Samuel the old hymns she remembered from childhood. These peaceful moments felt like answered prayers, yet shadows lingered at the edges of their happiness. Word reached the ranch through sympathetic neighbors that Victor Hale had purchased land near town. More troubling were the rumors that he was pressing the sheriff to investigate false claims against Levi's water rights. "Man's trying to squeeze us dry," Pete reported one evening, his lined face grave. "Sheriff's been asking mighty particular questions about our grazing boundaries." Levi took the news with outward calm, but Karen noticed how he studied their land with fresh intensity, as if memorizing every acre that might be threatened. Still, he refused to let worry poison their hard-won peace. Instead, he focused on the present joys: Samuel's growing confidence on horseback, Karen's flourishing garden, and the way laughter came more easily to all of them with each passing day. He treasured the sight of Karen teaching Samuel his letters at the kitchen table, and the sound of their voices rising in song from the restored chapel. One particularly fine evening, as golden light spilled through the chapel's clean windows, Levi paused in the doorway. Karen sat at the organ, her fingers moving smoothly across the keys while Samuel stood beside her, his high, clear voice joining hers in amazing grace. The sight filled his chest with a warmth he had almost forgotten how to feel. Whatever storms gathered on the horizon, this moment was a gift he would hold close. He stepped inside, his deep voice blending with theirs as the music filled the sacred space. Later, as crickets began their evening chorus and the first stars appeared above the ranch, Karen found Levi on the porch. His Bible lay open in his lap, though his eyes were fixed on the distant mountains. "Thank you," she said softly, settling beside him. "For what? For this home? For accepting Samuel? For believing in second chances?" She touched his hand gently. "For helping me believe in them too." Levi's fingers closed around hers, strong and sure. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky, while through the open window came the sound of Samuel's peaceful breathing as he slept. The afternoon sun blazed overhead when the thunder of hoofbeats shattered the ranch's peaceful rhythm. Karen looked up from her mending on the porch, her heart freezing at the sight of riders emerging from the dust cloud. Victor Hale sat proud on a gleaming black stallion, flanked by 4 armed men. Behind them rode Sheriff Dobbs, his badge catching the sunlight. Samuel, who had been playing with wooden horses near the steps, scrambled to Karen's side. She pulled him close, her fingers trembling as she smoothed his dark hair. Levi strode from the barn, his shoulders squared. Ranch hands drifted closer, hands hovering near their belts. "What brings you to my land?" Levi's deep voice carried across the yard. Victor's smirk widened as he dismounted. "Your land." He pulled papers from his vest. "These deeds say different, Branson. Seems your previous owner never properly registered the water rights. Makes this whole spread rightfully mine." "Those papers are false," Levi said firmly. "I've held clear title for 15 years. Sheriff Dobbs stepped forward, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Documents look proper to me, Branson. Victor here's made." "A legal claim? Legal claim?" Levi's voice roughened. "Or did your pocket get heavier, Sheriff?" Victor's eyes slid to Karen, who clutched Samuel tighter. "Speaking of claims," he drawled, "that woman you're sheltering belongs to me. Damaged goods, but still my property. I belong to no man." Karen's voice shook but held firm. "And these are lies." "Shut your mouth, woman," Victor snapped. He turned to his men. "Take Branson in for questioning. He's resisting lawful authority." Armed men advanced. Levi's ranch hands moved to defend him, but he raised his hand. "Stand down, boys. No blood over this." "Levi, no." Karen cried as 2 men seized his arms. He tried to shake them off, earning a rifle, but to his ribs. The crack of wood against bone made Karen cry out. Levi doubled over but didn't fall. "Stop it." Samuel screamed as they struck Levi again, driving him to his knees. Pete, the senior hand, started forward but froze at the click of Victor's pistol. Anyone interferes, they join him in jail. They dragged Levi to his feet, blood trickling from his temple. His eyes met Karen's, fierce with love and determination despite the pain. "Stay strong," he managed before they shoved him toward a waiting horse. "You can't do this." Karen's voice broke as she watched them bind Levi's hands. Victor walked to the porch, boots clicking on wood. "I can do whatever I please, my dear. You'd do well to remember that." His fingers reached for her cheek, but she jerked away. "Don't touch my mama." Samuel lunged forward, but Karen held him back. Victor's face darkened. "Keep that half-breed brat quiet, or he'll learn some manners the hard way." "Mount up," the sheriff called. "We're taking him to town." Karen watched helplessly as they rode. Away, Levi slumped in the saddle between 2 guards. Dust settled in their wake as silence fell over the ranch. The sun was setting when Ada arrived, wagon creaking up the drive. Karen had barely moved from the kitchen table. Tears dried on her cheeks. Samuel sat close, picking at a piece of cold cornbread. "I came as soon as I heard," Ada said, wrapping Karen in a fierce embrace. "The spirits warned me darkness was coming." "They beat him, Ada." Karen's voice cracked. "They took him away like a criminal." Ada's dark eyes flashed. "Victor Hale has always been a snake. But even snakes can be defeated with truth." "Is Levi gone forever?" Samuel's small voice quivered. Karen knelt before her son, cupping his face in her hands. "No, my brave boy, he will come home. I promise you." "Your mother speaks true," Ada said, settling beside them. The Creator sees all injustice. We must pray and be strong. In the town jail, Levi sat alone in the darkness. His ribs throbbed where the rifle butts had struck. He could taste blood from his split lip. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the fear gnawing at his gut. He thought of Karen and Samuel. Unprotected at the ranch, Victor's threat hung in the air like poison, yet something else burned beneath his anger and worry. Pride in Karen's courage, in how she had stood tall despite her terror. "Lord," he whispered into the darkness, "shield them when I cannot. Give Karen strength. Keep Samuel safe." His prayers continued as night deepened, a lifeline in the crushing dark. Back at the ranch, Karen tucked Samuel into bed. The boy had refused to sleep in his own room, so she made a nest of quilts near her bed. "Mama," his voice was small in the lamplight, "will the bad men come back?" "The ranch hands are keeping watch," she assured him, though her own heart trembled. "And Ada is sleeping in the next room. I wish Levi was here." "I know, sweet boy." She smoothed his hair. "But he gave us a gift. He showed us how to be brave. Now we must be brave for him." Samuel nodded solemnly. Karen knelt beside his makeshift bed, clasping his small hands in hers. "Dear Lord," she prayed softly, "protect Levi in that jail cell. Give him comfort and show us the path to bring him home." She squeezed Samuel's fingers. "Guard this child, Father. Let him feel your presence in the dark." "Amen," Samuel whispered. Karen held him until his breathing steadied into sleep. Only then did she let her tears fall silently, remembering Levi's bloodied face, his eyes full of love even in pain. Outside, an owl called mournfully. The ranch house creaked and settled. In her room, Ada's soft prayers in Cherokee drifted through the wall like a shield against the night. Karen wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. Tomorrow would bring new battles. But tonight, she would draw strength from Levi's example. Standing firm in faith despite the storm, in his cell, Levi shifted on the hard bench, ribs protesting. Yet peace slowly filled him as he pictured Karen's determined face. Samuel's trust, the family they had built from broken pieces. No false papers or corrupt sheriff could take that truth away. The night deepened toward dawn. In 3 different places, a jail cell, a ranch house, and a boy's makeshift bed, prayers rose like smoke signals through the dark, carrying hope toward morning's light. Dawn painted the eastern sky in soft rose when Karen stirred from her restless sleep. She had barely closed her eyes, spending most of the night watching Samuel's peaceful breathing and gathering her resolve. Now, as morning light filtered through the curtains, she knew what she had to do. Her plainest dress hung on a wooden peg, faded brown cotton, worn but clean. Karen's fingers trembled as she fastened each button. In the mirror, her reflection showed a woman transformed by purpose, though fear still shadowed her eyes. Ada appeared in the doorway, her dark eyes knowing. "You are ready." "I have to be," Karen whispered, smoothing her skirts. "For Levi, for Samuel, for every woman who stayed silent out of shame." Samuel woke as they prepared cornbread for breakfast. He watched them with solemn eyes, sensing the weight of the morning. "Are we going to help Levi?" he asked, crumbs falling from his small fingers. "Yes, my brave one." Karen kissed his forehead. "Today we speak truth." The wagon ride into town felt endless. Dust swirled around them as Ada guided the horses, her face set with determination. Karen held Samuel close, rehearsing the words she would say, praying for strength. Church bells tolled 9 o'clock as they pulled up to the whitewashed building. Already, townsfolk gathered for morning prayers. Whispers rose at their arrival. Ladies in their Sunday best drew back their skirts as Karen passed. But she kept her head high. Inside, the familiar scent of beeswax and wood polish filled the air. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting rainbow shadows through colored glass. Karen paused in the doorway, her heart thundering. "The Lord stands with the righteous," Ada murmured, squeezing her arm. Taking a deep breath, Karen walked down the center aisle. Her footsteps echoed on wooden floors as she approached the pulpit. Preacher Red rose from his chair, confusion crossing his weathered face. "Mrs. Branson, this is most irregular, please." Karen's voice shook but held firm. "I must speak." The congregation stirred like wheat in wind. Samuel pressed against Ada's skirts as Karen turned to face them all. Familiar faces looked back, some hostile, some curious, some already softening. With concern, "For years I have carried silence like chains," Karen began, her voice growing stronger. "I believed shame was my portion, that God had turned his face from me. But today I speak truth before his altar." She drew a steadying breath. "Victor. Hale attacked me 6 years ago. He took what wasn't freely given, then cast me aside like broken pottery when I carried his child." Gasps rippled through the pews. Several women pressed handkerchiefs to their mouths. The preacher's wife went pale. "He threatened to kill me if I spoke out. Said no one would believe a farmer's daughter over a railroad baron's son." Karen's fingers gripped the pulpit. "I fled in terror, finding shelter with Ada, who showed me God's mercy when this town showed only scorn." The church doors banged open. Victor Hale stood in the entrance, his face twisted with rage. "How dare you spread such lies?" he stalked. Down the aisle, boots striking like hammer blows. "This woman is delusional. She threw herself at me, then tried to trap me with her schemes." "No." Ada's voice rang out as she rose, straight and proud. "I witnessed her pain. I delivered her son in sorrow and secrecy, while she wept for shame not her own." 4 other Cherokee women stood from the back pews where they had been sitting quietly. One by one, they confirmed Ada's words, describing how they had helped hide and protect Karen and Samuel. "We saw her wounds," one elder said firmly, "both body and spirit. The mark of violence cannot be hidden from those who have eyes to see." Victor's face had gone purple. "You would take the word of savages over mine. We take the word of honest women over a proven liar," came a new voice. Martha Reed, the preacher's wife, stood trembling. I saw the bruises on her arms that day. I saw how she flinched from your touch, and I said nothing." Tears streamed down her face. "God, forgive my silence." The congregation erupted in murmurs. More women stood, sharing whispered stories of Victor's unwanted advances. His threats, his father's money buying silence. The preacher gripped his Bible, head bowed in evident shame for his years of judgment. "This is absurd." Victor shouted. "Sheriff Dobbs will what?" Another voice cut through the chaos. Sheriff Dobbs stood in the doorway, his face grim. "We'll help hide more crimes?" "Not this time, Victor." Too many witnesses now. Too many voices speaking truth. Karen swayed. Slightly, overwhelmed by the surge of support. Ada steadied her with a strong hand. Samuel ran to wrap his arms around her waist, his face buried in her skirts. "You'll regret this," Victor snarled, backing toward the door. "All of you." He fled, leaving only the echo of his boots and the heavy scent of fear swept behind. Silence fell in the church. Then Preacher Reed cleared his throat. "Let us pray," he said hoarsely. "For forgiveness, for justice, for healing." The congregation knelt. Karen felt tears sliding down her cheeks as dozens of voices joined in prayer. Not prayers of condemnation. This time, but of repentance and support. Later that evening, Karen sat in Ada's cabin just outside town, too drained to make the ride back to the ranch. Samuel slept in her lap, his small face peaceful. The weight of his trust both comforted and humbled her. "I never thought I would speak without fear again," she whispered to Ada, who stirred honey into tea nearby. "Never dreamed I would find." "My voice, the Creator gives strength when needed most," Ada replied, pressing the warm cup into Karen's hands. "You spoke not just for yourself today, but for many." Do you think Karen hesitated? Do you think Levi will hear what happened? Ada's smile held wisdom and hope. News travels fast in small towns, even to jail cells. Indeed, in his cold cell, Levi sat straight as whispered words reached him through the barred window. Pete, his ranch foreman, stood in the alley below, sharing the morning's events in low tones. You should have seen her, boss, standing tall as any preacher, speaking God's honest truth. Whole towns turning against Victor now. Sheriffs looking mighty uncomfortable, too. Levi closed his eyes, heart swelling with pride and love. His ribs still ached from the beating, but hope burned brighter than pain. His Karen, his brave wife, had found her warrior spirit at last. Through the jail's thick walls, he could just make out the evening church bells tolling. Levi bowed his head, adding his own prayer of gratitude to the symphony of change ringing across Dry Creek. Word spread through Dry Creek like wildfire the next morning. Shopkeepers paused their sweeping to share whispers of Karen's brave testimony. Ranchers gathered in clusters outside the general store, their faces dark with anger at Victor's schemes. By early afternoon, a crowd had formed outside the jailhouse. Matthew Turner, the blacksmith, stepped forward first. "We demand Levi release," he called out. "No man should be jailed on false claims." Sheriff Dobbs shifted uneasily on the wooden porch, his badge catching the sunlight. More voices joined in until the sheriff had no choice. With trembling hands, he unlocked the heavy iron door. Levi emerged, squinting in the bright light. Purple bruises marked his face, but he stood tall. A few brave souls cheered, their voices echoing down the dusty street. Victor Hale watched from the shadows of the saloon, his men fingering their weapons. "This isn't over, Branson," he snarled, before slinking away. The sunset painted the sky orange when Levi rode up to his ranch. Karen and Samuel burst from the house, running to meet him, their arms wrapped tight around him as his ranch hands looked on, hope kindling in their eyes. After a quiet supper, Levi retreated to the barn. The rasp of metal on stone filled the night as he sharpened tools, his mind heavy with thoughts of protection. Karen found him there, leading Samuel by the hand. "We stand with you," she whispered, placing their son's small hand in his calloused palm. Levi nodded solemnly, drawing strength from their touch. Family anchored him now, giving purpose to his struggle. Dawn painted the Colorado sky in streaks of pink and gold as Victor Hale approached the ranch, flanked by hired guns. Their horses' hooves kicked up dust along the fence line. But they weren't alone. Behind Levi stood dozens of determined faces from town, rifles ready. Time stretched tight as a wire as both sides faced each other. Sunlight glinted off gun barrels, promising violence. Then Levi did something unexpected. He stepped forward into the space between, and with deliberate care, laid his rifle in the dirt. His voice carried strong and clear across the morning air. "A man who protects the ruined is the only one worth trusting." A heartbeat of silence followed. Then cheers erupted from the townsfolk as they surged forward behind him. One by one, Victor's men lowered their weapons. Reading the tide of community spirit turned against them. Victor's face twisted with rage as he realized his isolation. With a string of curses, he wheeled his horse around and fled, jeers following his retreat. The corrupt sheriff slunk away shortly after, badge discarded in the dust. Karen rushed to Levi's side, happy tears streaming as Samuel wrapped his arms around them both. Their neighbors gathered close, pledging friendship and support. That evening, the old chapel bells rang out across the valley for the first time in years as the whole town celebrated their victory together. Weeks passed, and on a bright Sunday morning, the transformed chapel on Levi's ranch buzzed with activity. Fresh paint gleamed on the walls, and sunlight streamed through newly repaired windows. The worn pews now shone with polish, welcoming the gathering. Townspeople. Karen's voice rose clear and strong, leading the congregation in amazing grace. Samuel sat snug between his parents, tiny fingers laced together in prayer. Even those who had once shunned Karen now joined her song. Their faces softened with humility. Preacher Reed stood at the simple pulpit, his expression thoughtful. "Pick any girl, pure or ruined," he began, then stopped himself. Drawing a deep breath, he smiled. "And see how God makes all things new." Levi's weathered hand covered Karen's as their neighbors nodded respectfully. After worship, the congregation spilled into the ranch yard where tables sagged under the weight of covered dishes. Ada watched from the shade of an oak tree as Samuel played tag with the other children, his laughter mixing with theirs. The setting sun painted the sky in warm gold, blessing the gathered community. Karen felt peace settle in her heart complete. At last, beside her, Levi's eyes shone with quiet love. "We are whole again," he whispered. "Thanks for taking a moment to feel with me. If this story reminded you of what matters, hit subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow, continuing our story.